Welcome to Body Talk. This should be a real important show to parents of athletes and young athletes. So we have some really good information for you, so stay tuned. Hey, glad you could stick with us. And today on Body Talk, I have Tara Gerlach, the head athletic trainer here at Rio Grande, and we'll get to meet her in just a minute. Been doing athletic training for a number of years. So we have some good information for young athletes and sports injuries, and maybe how to prevent them and what to expect from your young person in sports. So welcome, Tara.
Thank you.
Said you were athletic trainer.
Yes.
Correct? When did you start doing that, and what's a little bit of your history and background?
I started into it in college. Got into college, decided that was going to be my major. I went to Marietta College. Majored in sports medicine, which was a nationally accredited athletic training degree. So I was there for 4 years, did my master's degree at Marshall. While I was there, I was working at Huntington High School. And then I had a job working at a clinic in Parkersburg, West Virginia, was contracted out to a couple of different high schools there. And then I've been working here at Rio Grande for a little over 18 years now.
Okay. So when somebody says athletic training, is this someone who works with the team that helps them work out, or how is that different than, I guess, your trainer that you take to the gym?
Okay, yeah, that's a really good question. We have sort of a confusing title for our name, because we are on the healthcare end of things. Some athletic trainers do move into the fitness world as well, get strength and conditioning certification. Things like that. I've stuck on the healthcare end of things. That's what the athletic training was set up to do, is work with the healthcare for physically active people. So sometimes that is working specifically with a team or a group of teams at a school. Sometimes that's working in a clinic and doing rehab with patients there. I did both when I was at my previous job, both with high school teams and working with the general population that came in for rehab. So yeah, we kind of can cover the gamut.
Okay, would you say that, I went to, what do you call it, rehab?
Yes.
What's the difference between those people that work in rehab, we wouldn't call it training, I can't remember what the name of it is right now. I had an injury, had surgery, and then had to get physical therapy. Physical therapist.
Yeah.
What's the difference between that?
Well, in a rehab setting, you might see physical therapists. Physical therapists and athletic trainers have a lot of overlap in their careers, but some slightly divergent things. Usually athletic trainers are working more solely with an athletic or an active population, and sort of see it from the injury eval on site sometimes, straight on through the rehab process. Physical therapists also are doing injury evals.
Is it more that you're stuck with a team and you follow a population?
Not necessarily.
No.
In my case, yes, that's the particular job avenue that I've chosen. But there are athletic trainers who spend their whole career doing rehab in a therapy setting, doing the rehab and working with physical therapists, working with physical therapy assistants, all working together. And some of the patients might go with the physical therapist, some with the athletic trainer, some might see both.
I think you told me that you're there for like all practices, or as much as you can in all games, or
Yes,
at least home games.
home games. I don't get to travel a whole lot with our teams. Usually when we have
Would the opposite team's athletic trainer help?
would then take care, and a lot of small colleges like this are in the same boat as we are here at Rio Grande, you know, really kind of understaffed for what we're trying to do. So if our men's soccer team, for example, they were on the road in Chicago this weekend. So I emailed the athletic.
You didn't get a trip to Chicago?
I did, and I stayed here and was working with, there was a women's soccer game. So I couldn't really go on the road with the men, and then we wouldn't have anybody here for health care for the women's soccer game. But I emailed the athletic trainers ahead of time, you know, okay, this particular athlete has this need, or things that they can watch out for, and then they have my contact information if they need to get a hold of me.
Mm-hmm. Is the audio doing all right? Okay. He's scurrying around in the background. I'm not sure if everything's cool or not. So what kind of injuries do you see the most of? And do certain sports have particular injuries?
Yes, there are some that kind of across the board are sort of your go-to injuries. Ankle sprains. Pick a sport, you're going to see ankle sprains in it, probably.
Because we're on our feet for the most part.
Right, and you know, a lot of athletic endeavors, you're either running or jumping, so your feet aren't always both in contact with the ground. And as your foot comes up and then back down, it's very easy to sprain an ankle. Mm-hmm. But yes, certain sports have higher instances of certain things. Obviously, a baseball, a softball, a track and field, the throwing implements, volleyball. If we don't have tennis here, but if you have tennis, anything that's doing a lot of overhead activity, you get a lot more shoulder, elbow injuries. Whereas, not that you can't get those in other sports, but a lot higher incidences there.
Right.
Then there's some that you might get more knee injuries, more ankle injuries, more back injuries. Some things have more overuse injuries and not as many of those acute sudden injuries. Others tend to have a little bit more of the
You
sudden
just wear it
injuries.
out rather than have an accident.
Correct. Yes.
Where you maybe come in contact with another player or...
Right. Sometimes those acute injuries, you know, you get, you know, a baseball or softball comes back and hits you. That's an acute, a sudden injury, as opposed to the distance runner who gets shin splints, that it's just overuse from the wear and tear on their legs of the constant running.
Now, we have softball and baseball. Do you see a lot of impact injuries? You know, I know they probably do wear helmets and all that sort of thing.
Yes, they do wear helmets while they're batting, but not while they're out in the field. I mean, you do sometimes see the pitcher that gets a line drive right back at them and hits them somewhere.
Right.
And that's what, or any other position. I mean, you can be
now,
hit
would you
by
be
the
out
ball.
on the field, or you stay up in your office and they transport?
I try to be on site for all of our home games. So if we've got a baseball game, I try to be at the baseball field while it's going on, you know, or whichever sport it is. Sometimes we have more than one sport going on at the same time with games. So if we have two contests going on at the same time, I try to stay mostly at the one that's got a slightly higher risk, but kind of bounce around between. And everybody has my phone number, so if I'm at one facility and we have an injury at a different facility, they can call me and get a hold of me.
Now, you said when we were talking earlier that women have a higher likelihood of being injured.
Yes, there are certain injuries for women that are a little bit more likely to happen. Women have a much higher risk of knee injuries, especially some specific knee injuries, ACL specifically, which is the main stabilizing ligament of the knee. Women also have a higher incidence of head injuries, concussions. Women just don't tend to have as strong of neck muscles as most men do, so they can have, because of the neck muscles being weaker, a little bit more of a whipping action in their head, which can lead to more brain trauma.
Like whenever you fall down and your head whips to the side, or if you impact somebody and...
Right, and your head gets it may not be the actual impact.
There's
Sometimes
soccer
it is.
when you were in your head the ball.
Head the ball. Yes, all of that can play into it. I mean, sometimes it is literally the impact to your head. Other times it is just that whipping action, and so because your brain shifts inside your skull, it kind of smacks into the inside of your skull. Right.
Is there anything you can do to prevent those things, or just know that this can happen?
A little bit of both. I'm not a huge fan of the term prevention. Yes, that's what we call it. We are never going to prevent
or
completely eliminate all
Right.
injuries, but we can do a lot of things to reduce risks. You can do neck strengthening exercises to help some with that
Is that where
possibility
you're
of the
like
whipping action.
pushing against something?
Yeah, it can be literally as simple as what you were just doing, just pushing against your hand for resistance. There are certain machines that help with that. Some stabilizing things you can do. With knee injuries, I talked about women having a higher risk with the knee injuries. That there's a lot of things that can be done to help decrease your risk with that. That usually involve getting with a professional to begin with. So whether that's an athletic trainer, a physical therapist, a strength and conditioning specialist, that they can sort of set up a program that as you do it and sort of get that muscle memory build up, that's better positions for your body to be in while you're participating. Like if you're jumping, better ways to land that are healthier for your knees. Certain strengthening things, conditioning things, stabilization exercises that just, again, decrease that risk.
And is that the coach that would help, or you?
It can be me sometimes. Sometimes it's the coach. Sometimes it's an outside physical therapist coming in, a strength and conditioning specialist. There's a lot of options. It's like I said, a lot of those, once you've learned how to do it, you don't necessarily need to continue working with that specialist all the time. But it's usually good to at least start out with
how. And make sure I'm doing it correctly.
And
because
then
you can do the right thing wrong.
Exactly, and then you're not doing anything to help. Then
Right.
you're just reinforcing something that's not going to do anything to prevent an injury and may actually increase your chance of an injury.
Now, I know when I was rehabbing my arm, I kind of gained a new respect for those physical therapists because
Yes.
they kind of know what they're talking about.
Yes.
And you don't, what they had told me, you know, because I'm kind of the no pain, no gain kind of person. You got to
Right.
go till it hurts. It's like, no, don't do that. You
Right.
can gain without
the pain.
right. And so, you know, the stretching and making
Yes.
sure you have full range of motion. And then even with my arm, just picking up 2 pounds at one point was enough.
Yes.
Now, it wasn't making me sore, but it was doing the right things to get me well.
Exactly, and yes, there's a lot of schooling, whether it's the physical therapist, the athletic trainer. There's a lot of schooling leading up to us learning all of those ins and outs. But yes, there's a lot of that is the no pain, no gain. I mean, everybody's heard that, but there are some things that we say, okay, this is not a no pain, no gain situation. You
Right.
can actually slow down your body's healing process if you push too hard.
Right.
Instead of decreasing your pain long term, you're just going to make it worse. So, stop it here at uncomfortable. Don't push it to actual pain.
Right. And so the next thing, what we had talked about was, has there been any changes over the last 20 years in injuries? And I saw a video online of a woman just doing some exercises and then rupturing her Achilles, and I thought, who does that? Is it old people? I was surprised that a mid-20s girl, and you could hear this, it was like a quiet gunshot, like bam, and her Achilles was ruptured.
Yes.
So I asked you at that point, how who gets this, and how common is it?
Yeah. Now, throughout my career, if you go back to when I was in school learning about all of this stuff, Achilles tendon rupture was an injury that we certainly learned about, but it was an injury that everything I learned, first 10 years of my career, everything you heard, you're never going to see this in the college age and younger athlete. This is a weekend warrior. It's the people my age who go out and play basketball with their friends on the weekend.
Right. I'm going to go out with my 18-year-old sons and try
to play basketball with them, and we're not quite as flexible as we used to be. And suddenly, pop, there goes your Achilles. Or
Right.
it was the aging quarterback in the NFL. There was a string of them through the mid to late 90s, the Dan Marinos, who are in their mid-late 30s, and there were 3 or 4 of them within a couple of years that happened. They're out there playing, and suddenly their Achilles tendon ruptures. I've started seeing a trend probably the last 5 or 6 years here of starting to see a lot of those younger athletes who they kept telling me in school I was never going to see Achilles tendon ruptures here, but the high school, college age athletes who are developing.
So these
the
are
Achilles
18 to
tendon.
25.
Yes, some of them even younger, because some of them they were happening in high school, and then I found out when they got here to me that they've had an Achilles tendon rupture.
Wow.
So yeah, we're starting to see more of that trend. There's other things that are decreasing some with injuries, but that's one that I've noticed a big increase.
What other
in
injuries
change.
like that have you seen?
I've seen a lot more UCL tears in the elbow, which is a stabilizing ligament in the elbow. If you follow a lot of baseball, you'll hear this referred to as the injury where they get the Tommy John surgery, that they usually take a tendon from your wrist and then replace that, put that in for the ligament.
That's an attachment not from muscle to bone, but bone to bone.
Correct. It's keeping your elbow from moving too far sideways, basically. Instead of in this plane, up and down, it's keeping it from going sideways.
Right, just like your knee, you're
right.
not going sideways.
Exactly. So, again, through school, we talked about those injuries. Yes, here it is. But at that point in time, you rarely saw a UCL tear outside of professional baseball. Now I'm seeing a lot more UCL tears. I'm seeing a lot of athletes coming in that have already had the surgery and repaired it. And I think a lot of what we're leading up to in that is it's overuse over time. It's, youth sports partially starting younger, probably less about starting younger, but more it's going to the year round of one particular sport and just the overuse of doing that over and over and over again over, maybe from the age of 7 or 8 up through high school. And if they've literally been doing the same repetitious motion over and over and over again, it's just causing so much wear and tear on those tendons or ligaments that we're starting to see more injuries with that.
So you're seeing a young college student come in with some joint issues like a 50, 60-year-old.
Yeah, sometimes. That they've just had that much wear and tear that we didn't used to see when, when I was growing up, I played softball from April to July, and then I would play basketball from November to March, and then that was it. But now there's great opportunities that weren't there when I was a kid. I would have loved to have been playing more softball than I was, but if they're doing that year-round and not really getting a break from that same repetitive motion over and over again, whether it's throwing a ball, whether it's
whatever
hitting
you're
a volleyball,
doing,
whatever it is,
much.
if it goes literally year-round and don't get breaks, or don't switch up to different sports year-round so that you're changing the same repetitive motion. Basketball motions can be very different than soccer or very different than baseball or softball or volleyball or whatever. So if you're switching those up, you're less likely to get that repetitive motion. But that year-round over and over again.
And even with runners probably too, right?
Yeah, it can even happen. Maybe you don't have maybe quite the same forces going through. If you're throwing a baseball, your arm is rotating so fast, even at those young levels where they aren't throwing. Their speed may not be, compared to a 90-mile-an-hour older pitcher, but your arm is still rotating at such a fast speed that's creating a lot of force through those ligaments that are trying to stabilize it.
And you're pushing it as far and as hard as you can go.
Right.
And I don't know, I'm not a baseball player, but the motion that you go through to throw a ball, it just does not look natural. It's like, that's a contortion.
It does, especially if you break it down in certain parts, it looks really odd on camera. But it does create a lot of force through joints. And again, it's not that the body can't adapt and do that, it can. It's just got to be done within reason. There needs to be the right amount of rest in between doing things so that it doesn't break down as quickly.
Right. And so I guess your advice for when should you start thinking about this? Is it the beginning of high school or before?
Definitely before. There's a lot of things that, again, if you've gone from the age of 8, even 8 to 14, I mean, just in those 6 years, that repetitive motion of, I don't want it to seem like I'm picking on baseball, it's just a really easy example of that baseball pitcher who's throwing a ball, throwing the ball. And okay, so they threw 70 pitches today. Well, if they turn around and throw 70 again tomorrow and do that every single day for 275, 300 days a year, that's going to cause a lot of excessive wear and tear on ligaments, on tendons, as they're constantly being pulled, cause some fraying to them that sooner or later is going to cause a breakdown of them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Early retirement.
It's important to start thinking of, again, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be playing at that age.
Right.
Absolutely not. I am a big proponent of sports. I love sports. I grew up playing sports. But it's got to be within...
Pace yourself.
Yeah, sort of pace yourself.
Don't do it spring and fall and summer and...
In winter. You probably need at least one of those seasons off.
Mm-hmm.
And
just
again,
like whenever you're working out, you don't, to get your best performance and lifting weights, you don't, because you break down your muscle every time you're
Right.
like going hard at it.
Right.
You need time for it to repair and get back to, I don't know if it's unbroken natural state.
Yes. Yes.
And if
yes,
you
you
keep
do
doing
need some
it-
of that breakdown in order for those gains to be made.
Right.
But if you just keep breaking it down and never allow it to build back up, that's when you get into injuries as opposed to gains.
And this takes more than a day.
Yes. Yes.
You're talking weeks and months sometimes just to get back to, a new point where you can start at
Right.
it again.
Right. And a lot of that depends on the injury. There are certain injuries that take longer to heal than others.
Right.
Depending on how severe an injury is, can play into how long it takes. There are certain amounts of time that it takes the body to heal that we can do nothing to speed that up. We can do things to slow it down and make it take longer to heal. But there's a certain amount of time that the body just needs that amount of time to regenerate some of that tissue, for that healing process to really take place.
And with my injury, it was a distal bicep tendon rupture. And whenever they repaired it, they had to cut some of it off and reattach.
Right.
So then at that point, your muscle and your tendons are shorter.
Right.
So it takes a lot of time to get that full range of motion
Right.
back.
You've got to allow for those muscles to then gradually lengthen to readjust to...
Gradually being
Right.
the key.
Right. Again, you're hoping to make it happen as soon as possible. I mean, that's one of our big goals during rehab, is for it to happen as soon as safely possible.
Right.
So yes, a lot of it has to be gradual. Sort of with that graduality, if you look at a kid who is 12, 13, 14 years old and they suddenly get that huge growth spurt, and they get those growing pains in their knees and Osgood slaughters. Well, their bones have lengthened so much, their muscles and tendons haven't had time to adjust to being this new length yet. So it's causing pain because they're pulling harder on their attachments.
You would think
For
that
the
the muscle would grow faster than the bone.
Yeah, but it doesn't. When they get that huge growth spurt where, the kid left the school year at 5'2" and comes back into the next school
5'8"
year
or
at 5'8", they get that 6 inches in 3 or 4 months' time. Those bones have lengthened tremendously, but those muscle and tendons have not yet had time to
Right.
adjust their flexibility, their
And
their
then playing
elasticity.
sports at that point in time
Right.
too would be.
And you see a lot of
Should they take a
pains.
break?
Not necessarily.
No.
You can still keep playing the sports through that, but you have to listen to your body that if it's a bad, there's going to be, yes, there's days it's going to be achy and that's okay, but if it's getting into that more severe
Painful.
pain,
If you're
then
taking
it's-
something to relieve the pain.
well, and even that even doesn't necessarily
No.
mean that it has to, depending on what level of something it is.
Okay.
There's some, it's one thing to take a couple of Advil and, okay, yeah, I get a little achy, but it feels okay. It's
Right.
something different if you're requiring
Okay.
narcotic pain medicines.
Oh, yeah.
That's a whole different level. And again, it's not that you can't continue to play and compete through these things sometimes. It's just about knowing your own limits, working with
You
a
might go
healthcare
in for
professional.
1 or 2 innings rather than half or 3/4 of the game.
Correct. Working with a healthcare professional that knows a little bit more of the ins and outs of, okay, this is how much it's okay to push it, but this is where we need to start backing you off a little bit.
Okay. So one of the major messages of this is to give yourself a break. Have some time to recover. If you're a young person and parent of a young person, give your child or young adult some time off of their sport.
Yes, like I said, again, sometimes that doesn't mean that they can't be playing a sport year-round, but probably at least one of those seasons needs to be a different sport.
Like on a lot of we have agriculture shows,
Yes.
crop rotation.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So that you don't get that overuse of the same minerals being sucked from the soil. Same thing, you're using the same muscles over and over again.
Right. And one other thing I wanted to quickly cover, when do you use heat and when do you use cold?
Hard, quick, dirty kind of rule with it is heat before, ice after, but don't heat if it's within the first 24 to 72 hours after an acute injury. If you have
so get the swelling down first.
Right. If you're using heat in that first, what we call the acute phase, that'll just increase the inflammation and probably make it take a little bit longer to get better. Don't get me wrong, heat feels great, but, and then using ice afterwards, there's sort of a misnomer that the ice is going to make the swelling go away. Ice doesn't actually make that swelling go away, but it's going to slow down any new swelling from coming.
Okay.
So it's going to decrease that new inflammation coming in that can sometimes slow down your body's healing process a little bit.
So we're taking down inflammation with the cold.
Right.
The heat is relaxing muscles?
Relaxing, just sort of by getting heat into it, it's allowing them to be a little bit more elastic. So
maybe
sort of think about a rubber band. If you stick a rubber band in a freezer and then try to stretch it, it's not going to be very stretchy and it may actually break. Whereas if it's warm, it's going to be nice and stretchy and do what you want. Same theory with muscles and tendons.
Okay. So if you go out and run and exert yourself, cold first?
No.
No?
Not
I
first.
don't know. I see people coming out of the gym and they've got like ice packs on.
Cold after. They've just gotten done working out.
That's what I was saying.
Yes. Cold after they're done working out.
Warm before?
Warm before.
Okay.
If you need it. A lot of people don't need it. They can just go through their warm up and be good.
That's where we used to use those leg warmers back in the 80s, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, I hope this is really good information for everybody. And again, thank you for watching Body Talk, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.